into the levels of recording and watching ourselves through the looking glass. No, I stopped it. So yeah, we've got, I'm going to put up where we left off, which was Hosea chapter 4, where Rosemary was reading for us. Right about here. Let me just get this off of, let some other friends in, letting people in. Good morning, everybody. One sec. Oh, wait, you fixed it, Mary. You made it disappear.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you. So, whatever. All these little things that pop up on our screen here. Good morning, everybody. What's really cool that I've noticed in the last few weeks is that we're definitely reaching some more people, because there are a lot more people that are watching on YouTube. But I'm like a lot more. It's bounced up a lot, which means somebody has been letting people know, which is great. But I would love for people who are watching on YouTube, I would love for YouTube watchers to also participate and be able to ask questions. I would love for
there are people, Rabbi, that do work, so they probably can't.
I understand, Mike. I understand. I get it, but I'm hoping that that of the 40 or so people that are watching these now, and it used to be like 4 or 5, that some of them can come in. My hope is that, number one, obviously people are here or on Zoom, so they can participate, they can ask questions, they can be a part of the dialogue. Next would be Facebook, because at least they're watching, they have a chance to watch it live, and then also can comment on it, and then I can respond later. People can comment on YouTube, but it's like, I don't think a lot of people have. And then the YouTube is the least, like, I don't even know who those people are. I can't even get their names of the people who are.
But you're saying there's 40 people that watch it from YouTube?
The last.
Wow.
And it's like, it's just gone up in the last, in the last few months. And so I'm asking for people who, and this is my hope, that if you are watching this later, that, like, last week's Beyond the Torah study has 35 views already.
Wow.
The week before has 59 views. So, I mean, that's wonderful, but I'd love for people to be engaged, and it's like, it's the most, or I put it in this way, it's the least connected way, because like I said, we don't even know who those people are. So,
Are you seeing the same thing for Wednesday nights or not?
Not as much. No, I haven't. So, look, there are other people who study the Torah portion, right? There are other people who study Pirkei Avot. There are very few synagogues in the world that are doing what we are doing, which is going through every page of the Tanakh. So it is unique. And so for people, Jews and or Christians, and I'm guessing maybe that there's that maybe some church groups or some other groups that aren't necessarily Jewish that are watching, which is wonderful. This is one of the few ways for people to have a Jewish discussion, or having almost any live discussion about every page. Because again, most Bible classes take verses out of context. They'll say, oh, we're going to read Hosea, but they'll read it in a 1-hour session, and they'll pick out 3 or 4 of the scenes, and that's it.
And you always bring out the history, which I appreciate. What's happening at the time.
Yes,
you give us a whole picture.
And that's really important, because very rarely does that happen. It does happen sometimes, but like 2% of the time. Most of the time, they don't talk about the historical context for them. And again, also relating it to how we live today, and why and how are what these people doing, these prophets who to a large extent, operate in obviously historically different times, but, behave in ways that, are kind of different for us. But I do think, and we've seen it in more maybe in Ezekiel and Jeremiah and now Hosea. I mean, Hosea is so dramatic and it's such a large part of Hosea is only 14 chapters, and 3 of the chapters we read last week were about him marrying a woman who is a prostitute, or at least is very adulterous. And that's a quarter of the book. We have what's performance art or performance prophecy, as we've talked about, where the prophet, and we saw it a lot in Ezekiel, where the prophet actually has to act out something. He actually has to do something to get people's attention, to bring the discussion into the world through some kind of action or behavior, or just doing something that will make people say, why is he doing that? Wow, that's and in Hosea's experience, again, as we mentioned last week, and by people I mean like Rambam, Maimonides, Rabbi Kimchi, the Radak. So many people did not believe that Hosea really did what God asked him to do. It was more of a hypothetical or a dream or a prophecy, because it's so difficult to do what Hosea would have done. And would God really command somebody to do this, to marry a prostitute, to have children whose legitimacy is at least questioned, or possibly not legitimate? Would God really demand that? That seems even extreme by the extreme things that sometimes God does or asks for. But I mean, doesn't say it's a dream. So it's an extreme, and one of the most memorable, if not the most memorable things that a prophet has to do. And again, as we mentioned last week, Hosea is a prophet who lives in the northern part of Israel, in the kingdom of Israel. He lives during the time of the Assyrians coming into the country and waging war, and eventually conquer the north, which is what he says is going to happen. He is a contemporary and lives in the same area as the prophet Jonah, who is, as we know, and we'll read in a few weeks when we read the prophet Jonah again, is the only prophet who people actually listen to. But of course, Jonah is listened to by the people of Nineveh, not by his own people. But we're going to see what Hosea does in the prophetic model that we've seen before, which is tell the people something, they didn't listen, and then we kept the book as a testament. The people of the south, the southern kingdom, kept this book because it was a testament and a warning, so that the same thing wouldn't happen to them during the time of the Babylonians. So this is why Hosea was kept, why he's so powerful, why he for the people of the southern kingdom probably also reminded them that there are people in the north who get this. There are people in the kingdom of Israel who wanted a unified, and maybe will want one day a unified kingdom. Because as we read at the end of the book of Ezekiel, Ezekiel foresees a time when all the tribes will live again in the land of Israel, right? Each tribe has a tribal allotment. It's a different allotment than what happened during the time of Moses and Joshua, but each tribe is going to have a home. So Hosea, reaffirms that for the people of the south, that yeah, the northern and southern kingdoms will once again be unified. We'll see that today. Today we're going to read, or starting in chapter 4, we're going to read another section of it. And again, next week, we're probably going to finish Hosea. We're probably going to finish this prophet, who is one of the longer prophets of the what we call the minor prophets, the smaller prophetic books. This is one of the longer books. So in some cases, we're going to read the whole book in a day. And in some cases, we're going to read a couple prophets in the same day during our time together. So Hosea, we continue with him in chapter 4. For those who, there are still a couple people coming in, so I was kind of giving a little introduction. Last week we did a lot of introduction. We did about a half-hour introduction. I did a little introduction today as I was trying to get some time for people to come in. Um, um, so, Rosemary, you're
Yes,
there?
I'm
Still
here.
Still letting people in. Let me just, I'm gonna do one thing real quick before we start, as people come in. So, the prophets, all of our prophets, but especially these ones that I mentioned, they engage in activities that are meant to get people's attention. So, as no one's commented on it yet, but I think most people realize what I'm wearing right now. I'm wearing this from now on. Started on Sunday. So, oh, here's Reverend Lynn. So, picking a page, and I didn't invent this, but as you see, Rosemary, now because I made it a little bit bigger. Reverend Lynn, we are about to get into Hosea chapter 4, but this will be what I'm going to be wearing every day, doing a little prophetic work, little prophetic performance art. Because everybody who I see in my comings and goings will see this number. So, Rosemary, you figured out what it is.
The hostages?
Yeah, it's how many days the hostages are being held. So this will be on my clothes every day until they come out. Whatever I'm wearing, this will be on. So I've said that, again, as much as sometimes I feel like I've gone through the looking glass, I know that the children and the war that needs to end will end when these people come home. So again, sometimes I feel like people have forgotten how this started, but it's not gonna, I'm not gonna forget it. I'm not gonna let people forget. So I was with some people last week in Arizona and Phoenix at an event for the JNF that was Jewish National Fund that was in Phoenix, and one of the speakers was wearing the day 111, and that was, I said, you know what, I need to do that too. So I didn't invent it. I didn't come up with the idea myself. God didn't tell me to do it, but I feel to some extent called to do it. So yeah. That's the only statement I'm making. Let those people go home. And obviously I hope it ends the bloodshed on all sides. But yeah. So what we finished with last week, what Rosemary finished with was this last section, which Hosea, again, after chapter 3 ends with, which is the story of him having to marry a prostitute or a very adulterous woman. Hosea in chapter 4 starts to talk about the fact that the people, and again, this is where his prophetic poem begins, that God has a claim, has a case against the people. There is no honesty, no goodness, and no devotion to God in the land. And what's interesting about that is that, of course, he's been talking about, and we saw right away that the worshiping of other gods is why he has to marry this adulterous woman. He's reenacting the fact that Israel as a people have been adulterous in their relationship with God. They've been worshiping other gods, and they have been like a faithless wife. By the way, we didn't talk too much about it, that we did talk about it, the fact that Israel is compared to the woman, to the wife in that. Israel is, in a few cases, we read about it in Ezekiel too, that Ezekiel compares Israel to a young woman. that is betrothed to God, the man. We'll also see Hosea compare Israel to a child who upsets his father. Those relationships are definitely patriarchal. They definitely reflect a time when men were fathers and husbands and had a role of power and ownership that they don't have anymore. But or in most cases, at least in our society, would not be thought of as acceptable or encouraged. But they are here, and they're taken for granted, and there's not really a need to explain or to explain this imagery. And we get it. I mean, we still live in enough of a patriarchal society. Maybe many of us were still raised in homes where they were fairly patriarchal. But what's interesting about this relationship is that it's not meant in a, well, first of all, if we're comparing ourselves to a woman, that means that there is no issue with us as Jews envisioning ourselves in a feminine position, which or no question that it's presented in a dependent fashion. And by that I mean the husband was supposed to provide for the woman, and so the woman is being provided for, even though she doesn't deserve it in Hosea. But so that's accepted, and it's there's not even a comment about it. But what's interesting about that is that allows us to at least begin to have the dialogue and to have the approach today where we can say, oh, well, Israel is a woman, or is the feminine, and therefore we can understand ourselves in feminine terms because the Bible itself lays this out. So for people who have an issue with Israel being, and again, since today, I would argue, feminine is not in a role of being subjugated or being dependent or being the dependent one, that one could say that this opens us up to the ability to have discussion or dialogue with the feminine, with Israel in a feminine sense, without it being anything other than biblical. And it opens it up for a theology and an approach that allows us to express the feminine as a people. So if it's no longer a sense of dependency, or doesn't have to be a sense of dependency, that means we can have a dialogue, or we can express who we are as a feminine because the Bible does. So if anybody said, well, why are you talking about Israel in the feminine sense? Hosea did, God did. So there's a context and a language, and more importantly, a historical precedent that I can point to. Now they could laugh and they could say, well, you know what that means. That's a dependent position. So, well, that's your understanding of it. That might be a historical understanding of, but if God is timeless and we live in a different time, then it's totally acceptable. So I think it at least opens it up for us to look at it in how, what would this mean to us today?
So for God being seen in the feminine.
Absolutely. And so the same thing goes for God. When God is in the feminine, or the Torah is in the feminine, or Shabbat is in the feminine, whatever it is, it opens it up to that discussion and that explanation that we can give today, that when people say, well, that's weird, you talked about God like a woman. I said, well, the Bible does. So it allows us the ability to say, well, we're only following what's there in the text. And then that allows us to be protected to some extent. We can wrap ourselves in the text, and it allows fundamentalist or more literal people, they don't have that same out by saying, well, this is not biblical. Yeah, it is. It's right here. So what's interesting, of course, too, is that Hosea is not just talking about worship of God. he's not just talking about the way we pray, because he starts off right here with there is no honesty and no goodness, and then no devotion to God. So as much as he's railing against their apostasy, their idolatry, their lack of faith, their worshiping Baal, which we already saw, he's really not happy with their behavior. And that's what he launches into. False swearing, dishonesty, murder, theft, adultery. Crime follows upon crime. So he doesn't launch into, in chapter 4 at least, when he's really kind of now getting into the meat of his prophecies, he doesn't launch into the idolatry. He actually launches into their behavior. He launches into what they're doing. He does get into their lack of fidelity with God. My people is destroyed for a lack of devotion. You've rejected devotion, but it's also because you've spurned the teaching of your God. It's not just that you've not done the sacrifice to the right people. It's that when you're doing this stuff, you're also bad. You're doing bad things. You're behaving badly. You're not enforcing the laws. You're allowing people to get away with this stuff. So this is what he said, and this is what we finished with last time. With Rosemary, the last line she wrote, a lecherous impulse has made them go wrong, and they strayed from submission to their God. So it ends with that submission to God, but it's not just a matter of the way that they're worshiping. It's what they're doing, and this part is about their idolatry. But watch what it does almost right away. So Rosemary, if you want to take it away.
They sacrifice on the mountaintops and offer on the hills, under oaks, poplars, and terebinths, whose shade is so pleasant. That is why their daughters fornicate and their daughters-in-law commit adultery.
Yeah, we actually read this part. I remember.
Right.
But it's so good. Let's keep going.
I will not punish their daughters for fornicating, nor their daughters-in-law for committing adultery, for they themselves turn aside with whores and sacrifice with female consecrated workers. A people that is without sense must stumble. If you are a lecher, Israel, let not Judah incur guilt. Do not come to Gilgal. Do not make pilgrimages to Beth Aven, and do not swear by God.
Now that's interesting because remember, Hosea is living in the north, right? He's telling people, you're already worshiping in these places you're not supposed to worship. So even though he's from the north, he's telling people you're not supposed to be worshiping there. You're not supposed to. And it's also telling us that Judites are also going to those same places, not just Bethel and Dan in the northern kingdom, right? Bethel was not far from Jerusalem, 10, 15 miles away. And then Dan was all the way at the top. Those two places where the golden calves were that Jeroboam made, those weren't the only places that people worshipped. There were other places that people worshipped as well. There were other shrines that they had. So just see there. So that Beth Aven is what he called Bethel, right? He calls it the house.
You've dropped out.
Can't hear you, Rabbi.
Are you back?
You saw I did nothing. Rosemary, can you hear us?
I can hear you now.
Okay, so something wigged out without me doing anything. And I didn't touch anything, so I didn't make it work. All right, keep going, Rosemary.
Israel has bulked like a stubborn cow. Therefore, God will graze him on the range like a sheep.
Well, what does that mean, right?
What does
Stubborn
that mean?
cow, right?
I'm not up on cows.
Well, you know, we assume based on what we assume that this is an allusion to. Well, let's read a little bit more. Well, no, actually, that's not gonna help us in this line. Sorry, it might be a few lines later, but yeah, Israel is not behaving like it's behaving like a cow that you can't that's not following directions. And so we can't really keep it with the rest of the cows. So we're going to let it go. And like sheep that kind of go off and graze and go up on the mountains and go to different places. I mean, they're usually obviously led by a shepherd, but they don't get to be in a pen anymore. They're not going to be kept on the farm. They're going to be out on the mountains, and they're not going to be in the safety of being on the farm. So this is not ideal. It's not, it's essentially saying they're going to go into exile because they couldn't behave around the farm. So this is again, how he describes the north.
Ephraim is addicted to images. Let him be. They drink to excess. Their liquor turns against them. They love beyond measure. Disgrace is the gift that the wind is bringing. They shall garner shame from their sacrifices.
Yep. And so this is their, the consequence of their idolatry. Yeah. We mentioned this last week. There are phrases in here that probably don't make as much sense to us, because even the people who read this 2,700 years ago, the people in the South, didn't fully understand this. We know that the language of Hosea is the northern dialect. And so there's phrases in here, including probably this one, that is a play on language that we don't fully understand. But it's definitely a play on language. The reason that love is in quotation marks is that this is a play on this is a play on their sacrifices, but it's also telling us that their alcohol, that the wine that they're using is actually not just an offering, it's part of the drunken debauchery the way they worship their gods. And it's a play on language. I mean, we can get enough of it to understand what they're talking about, but for the northern people, this probably was they understood exactly this phrase, or this was an idiom that people already used. Or it was a tweak of an idiom that people knew. So yeah, that's part of again these chapters of Hosea, this middle section of Hosea, which is this railing against their behavior, the people. So the first part was definitely still about the people, but it was played out with his marriage and raising these children that were maybe not his. But now it's really turning to the prophecies and to these to this condemnation. Again, directed to the north, but we kept it. The southern people kept it because it was a great warning, and it served our agenda too, which is it reminded the people of the north that you're not supposed to be separate. You're not supposed to be a separate kingdom. You'll see it. I mean, we haven't fully seen it yet, but there's a reason why Hosea is one of the only prophets from the north that we know about. Because not only did he tell the people they were doing wrong with the way they were worshiping God, but that they were also doing wrong by the fact that they didn't recognize the Davidic dynasty. But it also tells us that there were people in the north who said that. There were people in the north who said, we're not doing the right thing. We are supposed to be advocating for our union. The equivalent would have been somebody in the South during the Civil War telling the people of the South, you are doing the wrong thing. We are supposed to be one unified country, and we're not supposed to be disassociating from the North. We're not supposed to be separate. That's what this guy would have been the equivalent of. Somebody in the South during the Civil War telling his people that, and that we're doing the wrong thing. You can imagine how popular that person would have been. So here's chapter 5. And again, beginning of a new prophecy.
Hear this, O priests, attend, O house of Israel, and give ear, O royal house, for right conduct is your responsibility. But you have been a snare to Mizpah and a net spread out over Tabor. For when trappers dug deep pitfalls, I was the only reprover of them all.
So look at this note right here. It says meaning of verse uncertain. I mean, we think that that's what the phrase means, that it's connected to the snares and to the traps, to the nets, but we're not really sure. And again, this is because Hosea is a prophet who is speaking in a language the dialect is a little different, but we think that that's what it means, but there's other possibilities. Verse 2, Mary, what does yours say? Yeah.
And the revolters are found to make slaughter, though I have been in fever.
It's a completely different thing. So again, what did it say again? What was the first line?
And the revolters are profound to make slaughter.
The revolters are profound to make slaughter. That's a little different for when trappers dug deep pitfalls. What does yours say, Reverend Lynn?
And they have pit of Shittim,
Yeah,
but I will chastise.
yeah, they're totally different because we're not really sure. What?
My translation of Hosea for the most part. Is
Yeah. There is no book of the Bible that is more obscure percentage-wise than this. And the problem is the Septuagint is no help. As far as a different text, it's the same problem. It's even worse to some extent because the Septuagint already starts to do what these different translations are doing. It's trying to figure it out. And so it throws out words like we're not even sure. Well, if we didn't have the Hebrew, we would not even know what they were saying. So it's a very big problem with Hosea that we don't understand it. Now, for the most part, it doesn't change maybe the impact of it or the point of it, because the last line, Ani Musar Lekulam, I'm a reprover or I'm a rebuker of them all. What does yours say, Reverend Lynn? What did it say? Chastise them. That we get. I mean, however you're going to translate the word Musar, we get that. It's God's going to tell them the real way. Hosea is telling them, God said, I'm reproving you. So the word Musar, by the way, in Judaism is an interesting one because that's a whole thought process, right? In Judaism, we talk about Musar, which is a stream of Judaism, which is different than Hasidism. It's different than Hasidic Judaism. It's different than some of the other styles of Judaism. The Musar movement began in Europe, primarily in Lithuania and part of the Russian Empire at the time, by some of the rabbis in that area who said that the Hasidic movement said, we have to focus on ecstatic prayer and on dancing and on feeling God emotionally, which is weird because we don't think about Hasidic Judaism as being as vibrant as that, but that's what it was. It was actually a challenge to the rigidness of the rabbinic thought that was, we have to understand this, we have to study it, and Hasidism says we have to feel it. Well, Musar was a little different. Musar believed that the focus in Judaism needs to be on our behavior, on our ethical behavior. And people have gone back to studying Musar in the last few generations, really the last generation. Musar as a study, you'll see that is being offered in different places because it focused on ethical behavior, not so much on study, not so much on religion, not so much on anything other than how are we acting? How are we behaving as individuals? And so that was really the focus of Musar. M-U-S-A-R, Musar. Musar, sometimes two S's, Musar, but the study of it, and there's been a lot of books written about it lately, is really about, and it kind of dovetails into the kind of the self-help and personal growth, the popularity of those in the last years. And so Musar really focused on how are we acting, and guides to that. So again, it goes back about 200 years. It's had a revival lately.
I hear it a lot when we do high holidays. We talk about Mickey Dote, you know?
Yes. And so that's, again, right, the principles of our actions. And so Musar will sometimes focus on, let's say a book on Musar will focus on, the way we talk, for example, avoiding, spreading gossip, how we treat people who have less than we do, those kind of things of not these kind of principles of ethical behavior. So it's really ethical behavior. And it was a focus for that group of rabbis who said, it's, what we really need to, this is what God really wants it. And so, when we see words like this, when we see the phrases themselves in the Bible, it reminds us of these concepts. But get back to the weird translations. The weird thing is Reverend Lynn's translation wanted to translate the word shittim, which it didn't even translate it. It just said it in Hebrew, transliterated. Shittim is acacia wood. Is an acacia tree, the shittim. So they didn't even translate it because it doesn't really seem to make sense. So there are phrases here which, again, sometimes we're trying to guess from the context. But yeah, I'm not going to point them out every time, but trust me when I tell you, they are frequent. I don't know that this one was, no. But these are, again, different translations. There are, in some cases, much different. But again, I think, we get the point of it, but it is a very tough book for people to translate and say, oh, this is the definitive translation. Scholars of Hosea will say, it could be this, or it could be this. We're not sure. So, but that, again, it's not like the whole book is like that, but there's enough of it that we go, hey, how do I translate that? So I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to point it out every time.
Yes, I have watched Ephraim. Israel has not escaped my notice. Behold, you have fornicated, O Ephraim. Israel has defiled himself. Their habits do not let them turn back to their God. Because of the lecherous impulse within them, they pay no heed to God. Israel's pride shall be humbled before his very eyes, as Israel and Ephraim fall because of their sin, and Judah falls with them.
Yeah, and that's pretty, like that phrase, that's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. Again, there might be a little nuance of language here, but the fact that Israel and Ephraim are mentioned there as are going down because of their sin, avonam, their sin, that's pretty obvious. And the phrase ends with, and Judah is with them. Judah's going down with them. So what's interesting, of course, here is that Judah, Judith just raises the interesting question: is Israel male and Ephraim, and Ephraim himself with Israel herself? That's an interesting phrase because, again, yeah, it could be that. I'm just looking. I mean, in this, they're both used in a male form, but They're both male in this one, and then Judah is also male. All
But in
three
the
of them.
but in the previous chapter, Israel was.
Oh yeah, no, there's
Yeah.
no,
I mean, the
there's no
previous
question.
philosophy, prophecy.
Yeah, there's no question. Here, it's definitely male. And what's interesting too is one could make the argument, I'm gonna say that this is why we encourage this, but he is playing here off of, if he's playing in the previous chapters off of female adultery, here he's playing off of male pride. I'm just pointing this out. It's the Geon Yisrael, the Fanav, his faces, his prideful face. It's an interesting idea. Definitely has something to think about, the gender issues there.
Then they will go with their sheep and cattle to seek God, whom they will not find. They have been cast off because they have broken faith with God, because they have begotten alien children. Therefore, the new moon shall devour their portion. Sound a ram's horn in Gibeah, a trumpet in Ramah. Give the alarm in Beth Aven. After you, Benjamin. Ephraim is stricken with horror on a day of chastisement. Against the tribes of Israel, I proclaim certainties. The officers of Judah have acted like shifters of field boundaries. On them, I will pour out my wrath like water.
Yeah.
Now,
So
no
there's Judah.
offense, that's a still get you in trouble in Texas.
Yeah, that's Judah. That's Judah being called into, which we haven't read much of, but yeah, I mean, he's calling Judah into account. And yes, and what is he like? A shifter of field boundaries. Masigay Gavul. Yeah, that's pretty much a low life thing to do, right? Shifting field boundaries. So people used to have, they used to have like some stones set up that would be a marker, and somebody would move it. You'd be like, can you believe that? That person's stealing from us by moving the marker. So yeah, this is for people that were farmers and had property lines that were important. Yeah, that's a pretty bad thing to do. So that's what the people of Judah were doing. And again, don't have that phrase a lot. I don't know that we've actually encountered that phrase so far, Masigay Gavul, but yeah, that's definitely something that they were concerned about in the South and the North, but they probably were concerned about it in the South too, but where they had tribes they had more tribes in the North, right? They had the 10 tribes in the North that were probably a little bit more concerned with tribal boundaries than the South did, because they only had the one kingdom. They had the one tribe, the tribe of Judah. So the field boundaries were probably, for Judah, was just, hey, where's the marker between Judah and Israel? But for the tribes in the North, there were a lot of tribal boundaries. There were a lot of boundaries that people had to deal with. So
Ephraim is defrauded, robbed of redress, because he has witlessly gone after futility. For it is I who am like rock to Ephraim, like decay to the house of Judah.
by the way, I'm going to do it again. I just said I'm not going to do it. I gotta do it. I gotta do it here. This is another one. Mary, what does your translation have for verse 12?
I will be unto Ephraim as a loss, and to the house of Judah as rottenness.
Okay, well, it's not that different, but the word that they had there was
What is
like a what? A moth. Yeah, like a flying moth. What does yours have? Reverend Lynn has a moth too. Somebody else was going to say something? No? Okay. So let's see what they have here. Emendation yields Israel. I'm not sure what. I'm not sure that they may be talking about a different, they might be talking about a different version of this, either in the Dead Sea Scrolls or in the Septuagint that actually uses the word Israel instead of Yehuda there, Judah. It said Ephraim and Israel, but it could be Judah. I mean, based on the context, they mentioned Judah here. It's not like it couldn't be Judah, but there might be other texts where. But yes, rot or moth. I mean, we're not really sure what the words exactly mean, but again, the concept is that this is not good. That both again, either Ephraim and Judah, or Ephraim as the northern kingdom, is going to rot, and God is going to be the one that's
But moth is
doing
sort
it.
of like nothing.
Yeah, it's weird, unless they're talking about a moth that eats people's clothes. But there must be a reason why the newer translations have gone for that, have gone for moth rather than rot. But
Well, it also says rot.
yes, it does say decay and rot. So both of them, there's a concept, this is biblical poetry, that there's got to be it's a synonymous relationship, which is why they translated as rot and decay, because they figured that they were synonymous. And again, we have it all over, like in the next line.
Yet when Ephraim became aware of his sickness, Judah of his sores, Ephraim repaired to Assyria. He sent envoys to a patron king. He will never be able to cure you, will not heal you of your sores.
Yeah, so here it's sores and sickness are the images rather than rot and decay, but they're not, none of this is good. Let me just see this note here. Yeah. But this does tell us something really important, which is that the northern kingdom tried to make peace and tried to curry favor with the Assyrian Empire. And Hosea says, that's not going to work. He went to the Assyrians to try to, and that's the word, El Ashur. You went to the Assyrians and you tried to beg for, a pact with the king there. That's not going to work, right? He can't help you. So Hosea is saying, don't do that. It's a waste of time. It's not right. It's not what you're supposed to do. Get yourself right with God. Don't worry about what the Assyrians are going to do to you. It's not going to help anyways.
No, I will be like a lion to Ephraim, like a great beast to the house of Judah. I will attack and stride away, carrying the prey that no one can rescue.
Yeah, that's not a great translation either. I'm not even sure I guess they just figured that, say it again. What does your translation, Mary, say for verse 14? I will be like a lion to Ephraim.
As a lion, as a young lion to the house of Judah.
Yeah, and what does yours say there?
Same.
Yeah. So the line, the translation, and sometimes I just got to call it out because it just doesn't really make sense. I don't understand why they called it a great beast, because the word kafir is actually a young lion. It's the word we have for, again, we have 5 words for lions in the Bible, which again, they obviously had a lot of lions, because if you have lots of words for things, it's because there's a lot of them. So it's like the old, the Eskimo words for ice. Yeah, they're gone. They're dead. They're gone. But we have these,
Are they the same lions as-
they were like mountain lions. They weren't, yeah, we think they're more like puma and mountain lions. Not like the big lions in Africa. That these are mountain lions. They're cougars. So you still don't want to mess with them. I mean, they're bad to fight with, right? That's why, we have, Samson fighting with a lion or talking
Sort of
about,
reduces the Lion of Judah
yeah,
to.
to a mountain lion, not to a great.
I always thought of it as
Yes, it's not a big lion. But there are lions and then there's young lions, and a kafir is a young lion. You don't necessarily want to mess with a young lion. A young lion is a dangerous beast because it hasn't, figured out when it needs to attack and not attack. So it's not a great beast. It's actually just a very dangerous. It's a young lion, and it's a lion that maybe is, dangerous because of his strength and his energy level. Maybe he's not, he or she is not a more sedate predator. And again, these are probably lions that would attack sheep and cows and things like that, and occasionally people, but you don't want to mess with them. And it was why the shepherds would carry a slingshot like David did, so that he could kill these things, which he could. You could kill them with a slingshot, but they're dangerous. And in Israel, in the modern nation of Israel, has also become, even though there aren't any lions anymore in Israel, they become, the modern nation of Israel has rebranded the lion as an animal of strength. And it's why so many Israelis are named Ari or Arik, right? Or Ariel. That name means the lion of God, or the Ari is a lion. It's why we also have the kafir I mentioned was one of the Israeli jets, was a kafir. Was a lion cub, but they called it the lion cub or the kafir. It's why David Green changed his name to David Ben Gurion, because Gurion is a lion. Gur is another word for a lion. So Israelis took that image of a lion and used it as a symbol of strength. So it's why David Green became Gurion. It was not green. It was based on a Yiddish name or a German name for green, for the color green, for a field, for whatever. But it sounds like Gurion. It sounds like Gurion. It sounds like a gur, a lion. So people reappropriated the names of lions. Yes, the Lion of Judah was an image, but it's also, again, if you think about it, it's not the lion of the
GM thing.
yes, it's not that bold and as majestic also. But those lions, by the way, they sleep like 18 hours a day or something like that. And they're lazy as hell. The women are the ones that go out and hunt. You know that, right? The women are the ones that hunt. And those big lions with those beautiful manes, they just sit there and they have food brought to them. I mean, they're the laziest. They're beautiful. I love lions, but always have loved lions. But they're lazy, lazy, lazy. And they gave up a 17-point lead on Sunday too. So who does that? Detroit? Come on, had a chance. Anyways, so they got lazy in the second half. So maybe they were lazy. They got lazy. They sat on their prey. Thought they could. So yeah. So these are lions, and they are images of God, though, and this is what God is going to do to the northern and seems the southern kingdom. So here's the last line.
And I will return to my abode till they realize their guilt. In their distress, they will seek me and beg for my favor.
Yeah, and that's abode is a very, I don't want to keep harping on it, but it's a very different translation than the literal translation. And it's beautiful. It's poetic that God's going to go back to heaven, or God's going to go up to the abode. But what does the translation, Mary, say? Yeah, that's what yours says too, Reverend, yes. Right? That's the translation. Mekomi means my place. So God is going to my place. Wherever God's place is, if it's a home or if it's heaven or whatever it is, God is going back to I'm going back home. And you're going to look for me and you're not going to find me. But I'm at home. I'm in my place. My place. And that's where I will be. You'll seek for me, but at least that's how you'll start coming back. This is how Hosea sets up how this relationship gets fixed. but it gets fixed because you're going to get punished. You're going to cry out, and then that's when I'll come back. Well, let's get to that part. All right.
Come, let us turn back to God, the one who attacked and so can heal us, who wounded and so can bind us up.
Now look, this prophecy or this chapter doesn't seem to be necessarily the beginning of a new idea. This isn't like chapter 5 begins. Chapter 5 began, hear this, O priests, attend, O house of Israel, right? Shimu zot hakohanim. Now again, maybe that's not, maybe that's not a whole different idea from the beginning of from the previous line, which talked about sacrifices, but this one is clearly part of the same chapter. So I'm not exactly sure why verse 15 had to be the end of the idea or the end of the chapter, but here it's the return, right? Now here is the people saying, let's come back. But the fact that it has to be another chapter, I'm not really sure, because again, it definitely breaks it, but here, it really does fall right off of this. The relationship, you've ruined the relationship. I'm going back to my home, going back to my place. And now the people say, Lachuva nashuva. Nashuva means let us turn back. And that is what the word nashuva means, to turn back.
Such a way that visually it's just a continuum.
Does it the way you had it? That's the way that's the way it should be. So I don't think
7 is like that too.
I don't think the chapter really ends there, but I mean, the idea ends there. But here the people are turning back, right?
In 2 days, God will make us whole again, and on the 3rd day, raise us up. God's favor will make us whole.
Wow. What did you laugh for right there?
Well, that's so Christian.
Yep.
And obviously we appropriated that.
Yep. Yeah. So look, the plain version of the plain meaning of this is that God's going to restore us quickly, right? That it's not going to take long for God to God's going to fix this. But as Reverend Lynn says, this is for Christians, this sets up a midrash, an understanding that this is what happens when Jesus is resurrected on the 3rd day, right? I guess you could say, because it's not really leveled at anyone in particular, it seems like, again, the community is saying this actually. The phrase is actually us, right? So the Hebrew word is yekimenu. Yekimenu, nu means us, right? So this is clearly meant for more than one person. So the fact that it would apply just to Jesus there's nothing wrong with that. That's completely midrashic. That's a completely midrashic way of saying, well, he says the 3rd day, it's going to raise us up. And that's what it is, yakimen, to get up. And the fact that could apply to Jesus is, we could make the argument that it could apply to it applies to anybody. It applies to anybody that God is going to fix. God is going to make us whole, right? God is going to,
It's clearly.
yeah, but yes, it's clearly plural. And the whole thing, the beginning too, Yechayenu, which I don't love the translation of, and you can make the argument that a Jewish translator wanted to translate it this way, but Mary, what does your King James say? Yeah, he will revive us. Is that what yours says, or bring us to life? Because that's what the word chayenu means, right? Chai means life, right? So it's not just that God's going to make us whole again. That's, again, I blame the translator for that. I don't blame the text for that, because the text is poetic, right? The text, the text says the word chai. So even if I didn't want to translate it in a very Christological way, which is maybe why they translated this, but the literal translation is, in 2 days, God will make us alive again. I would translate it as would revive us. In 2 days, God will revive us. On the third day, God will bring us back up. And gosh, this is a weird, the word favor isn't even there. What does your translation say, Mary? The last line? Yeah. And what do you have, Reverend Lynn?
Mainly before.
Yeah. Nichaye lafanav.
The rest of it is wonderfully appropriated by Christian theology as well.
Of course, but the weird thing is the word favor isn't even there. So I'm not even sure where this translator even threw out the word favor in there, because the word chen is not even the word for favor. Chen is the Hebrew word. What do we say? You know, all the various ways that chen or chana, grace or favor is translated. It's not there. The word isn't there. And the word literally is v'nichaye lefanav, and we will live in front of him, lefanav, in his face. The word favor is not there, so it's not, the word isn't there. So yes, this line here would definitely be one that you can understand why Christians applied it to Jesus, but it really would be applied to everybody who is restored to life by God. And to say, look, you and I understand what this phrase means in the context, in the way that Hosea has said it, and the way that it's was understood by Jews at the time is like, and the phrase is a poetic one because, gosh, in 2 days, God is going to bring us back to life. And on the third, we're going to be right in front of him, which is saying it's going to get done quick. If I'm translating this in the meaning of what it is, gosh, it's only going to take God a couple days, right? We wouldn't even say 2 days, right? We'd say in a couple of days, because when we say a couple of days, we don't literally mean 2 days, right? We say that all the time. In a couple of days, it's going to happen. We don't mean, oh, it has to happen too. It's going to happen soon. It's not maybe a week. Maybe, I don't know what your couple days. I guess if you're like me and you're telling your kids we'll do it in a couple of days, they're like, Dad, that means nothing, right? That could be a month from now. That could be by the time I get married. But the couple days, if we understand it in the way we're supposed to mean it, which is it's going to get done soon. And that's what he says. And by the third day, we're going to be right in front of God again. So it's the understanding of it is that good things are going to happen to us quickly. And it's not going to take a long time for God to take us back. It's not like God needs a whole lot of time to take us back. That's what the plain understanding of this is. It's lost a little bit in this translation. It's lost in translations that obviously are trying to make it apply to Jesus and Jesus only. But this concept of God forgiving us and making us whole and bringing us back in, it's going to happen quick. And that's what it's supposed to be. It's clearly what the intention is. And it's always here. The whole phrase from the very beginning of this chapter is let us. It's all plural. Lechu v'nashuva. Let us turn back as a group, as it's not one person, right? So yeah. And by the way, it doesn't even deny that God hurt us in the first place, right? It's saying the people say, yeah, God did this. God hurt us, but God's also going to, because God hurt us, God can also heal us. Now that's something that people don't really want to talk about anymore, is God hurting us. But that's what they said. That's what they said. And they don't make any apologies for it. They don't, in their theology, they have no issue with it. They accept it. They don't.
Here says God becomes the enemy of Israel.
That's what it says. God was hurting us. God, I'm going to actually tell you what the word is. You can see it. Come on, somebody who knows Hebrew here. The word here is taraf. Come on, somebody, they translate it as attacked. But what does someone know? Somebody knows the word taraf means. Hello, anybody? I'm not making this up. by the way, could be the northern dialect that it simply meant attacked, but not really. Taraf, Judith, come on. What does the word trafe mean? What does the word trafe? Sheldon just said it. Horn.
It sounds like torn.
Yeah, it does, right? But the word trafe literally means something torn. It means something that's been shredded. It's roadkill, right? So it's something that's been killed, and literally like carrion, it's been ripped apart. So, so that's, I mean, we use the word trafe to mean anything unkosher now, but it became like the word for, oh, I don't eat that, that's trafe. That go in for a nice shrimp cocktail is trafe. But that's not what it literally means. It means torn, right? Torn by beasts. So that's what we are. We're trafe because God essentially tore us apart. It's not just God hurt us. It's not that God attacked us. God tore us. Tore us. That is what it says. And then God will heal us. Refa'enu, which is the word rofeh. Very, very great. Remember this, aggressive passive. It is aggressive, and it is an aggressive word. Does your translation say something different than attacked? Torn. It's a good translation. King James gave us the word. So attacked. What does yours say, Reverend? Torn. Yeah. So yeah, God tore us and now will heal us. So God did the wound and then God will heal us. So yes, but it is very passive aggressive. It's very scary because yeah, the thing that it,
For he has torn.
yeah, that he may heal us. So God beat us up and then binds us up afterwards. That's a wild image.
I would advise you to get out of that relationship.
That's a bad relationship. But Rosemary, you deserved it. No, that's what
they always say.
yeah, but I'm telling you, there's no apology for this. There's nothing other than this is the God has that kind of strength to do that kind of stuff, also has the ability to heal us. And as I said, it's not something that we feel real comfortable with today. Though there are traditional Jewish scholars even today who will say that's exactly what happens. God will exact tremendous violence on us and then heal us afterwards. And that's their theology. That's the theology of the Holocaust. It's the theology of October 7th. And every time the Jews get out of line, we'll get attacked. That's God too. And then God will heal us afterwards. So it is a
Dangerous relationship.
it's an uncompromising, difficult thing for our modern minds to wrap ourselves around. I think I have a horrible time with that theology, but this is where it's given in such beautiful poetic phrase, which is this is the beating that we just took will now be bound up by the one force that can actually do this. So yeah, God is going to bring us back to life. So what are we going to do afterwards?
Let us pursue devotion to God, and we shall become devout. As sure as daybreak is God's appearance, which will come to us like rain, like latter rain that refreshes the earth.
Yeah, and that's another example of, well,
So
yeah.
gentle, so kind.
Yes.
Being torn.
After being torn. And this is another example of words for rain that we don't have, or that we think that this is what it means, but yeah. This is a beautiful image of what God will do for us, which will nourish us.
What can I do for you, Ephraim? What can I do for you, Judah, when your goodness is like morning clouds, like dew so early gone?
And that again is a beautiful image, right? Morning clouds, that's the words. Anan boker is the clouds of morning. It's not a word that we use or we seen before.
What's the word for dew?
Tal. And that's the word there, katal.
Notre Dame, the guy from Israel.
Yeah.
His name was Tall.
Tal is a really common Israeli name. It's not based on a person, right? There was not a person Tal, but Tal is one of those.
What's a great sound?
Yeah, it's a great sound, and it's one of those names that became popular in Israel as Israel kind of took to not just images of strength, but also images of nature, right? And taking images of that are beautiful sounds, like the name Gal for a woman, which is like the shore, the sea or waves, these names that kind of became popular names in Israel in the last 30, 40 years, 50 years are names of natural occurrences. And Tal was one of those names that just like came out of nowhere. And then, all of a sudden there was a million Tals. So, and now Gals and there's a lot of those names that were not based on individuals of the Bible, which are somewhat problematic sometimes and also kind of boring actually too. So we get to these names now, but we're looking for imagery from here, nurturing waters that aren't necessarily rivers, right? They're dew, there's water, there's clouds. These are all about life. All right, so now
That is why I have hewn down the prophets, have slain them with the words of my mouth, and the day that dawned brought on your punishment. For I desire goodness, not sacrifice, devotion to God rather than burnt offerings.
Yeah, and that's a very important phrase for Judaism as it moved away from sacrifice. Well, you wouldn't expect a priest to say this, but Hosea does. And again, it goes right from the beauty of those prophecies of those poems, prophetic poems, to the force of what's happening here, which is, there was a big accounting. And what does God care about? Chesed, loving kindness, goodness. However you translate the word chesed, that's what God wants. It says, chafatzi, this is what I desire, right? This is what I want.
Love.
Yeah, which is the way they translate the word chesed. Mary, what does yours say? Mercy, loving kindness. Ahavat chesed, we say, is one of the things that God has and we have, which is a love of chesed. Yes, very much like Micah, right? We're going to read the prophet Micah soon, one of the other longer prophetic books. What does God want, right? To love justice and pursue, to walk in my ways. That there's a threefold one, and here it's a positive and in the negative, right? I desire goodness, not sacrifice, devotion to God, and this is so it's a two phrase. It's a little different from Micah, and it's not what do I want? I want this, this, and this. I want here. Which is a great one. It's one that Jews and Christians will agree is like one of the great phrases of the Bible. It's kind of what our Pirkei Avot that we're reading on Wednesday night, the ethics, the sayings of our sages. It really starts with that one from Micah. This one is similar to some of the Pirkei Avot in the way that it's laid out, the ethics. But this one is this and not that, this and not that. And so the this and not that is goodness, not sacrifice, devotion, Dad Elohim, rather than burnt offerings. Now, Dad Elohim also doesn't have to be translated as knowledge of God. Dad is to know God. Now, one could say that it means devotion, the way we pray to God, but that's not necessarily the way it has to be translated. I don't love that translation. What does yours say, Mary? Knowledge of God. What does yours say? Yeah. Knowledge is different than devotion, right? And so I don't know that devotion to God sounds like it's blind obedience to God.
Perhaps knowledge leads to devotion.
I would say knowledge could lead to devotion, but more importantly, I think knowledge of God or trying to understand God is also more along the lines of behaving like God, knowing God, and I would say knowing that devotion to God, I think, is more of like what burnt offerings are, which are, I love God and I offer sacrifices to God. To me, Dad Elohim is knowing God. Knowing God to me is walking in God's ways. That to me is closer to that, actually. Dad Elohim, and again, the word Dad, knowledge of God, is understanding, trying to understand God, not trying to worship God necessarily, but trying to understand God and to act like God, imitatio Dei, rather than not necessarily just love of God or you know, the blind obedience to God, but to do what God would do, to act like God, rather than just to be devoted to God. So I think it's really more about our behavior and the way we, maybe one could argue, treat other people, but maybe that's too extreme, taken too far. But when God says, I'd rather you be good than to sacrifice, or I'd rather you be behaving like me rather than just making sacrifices, because olot definitely is burnt offerings. That's definitely sacrifices. That's zavach and olot are definitely juxtaposed. That's the structure. But chesed must be translated or must be equivalent to Dad Elohim. So if chesed to me is loving kindness, mercy, then Dad Elohim must be loving kindness and mercy, because the sacrifice is sacrifices with the burnt offering. But whatever. I mean, that's the concept here. So let's go.
But they, as human beings are wont to do, have just transgressed the covenant. This is where they have been false to me. Gilead is a city of evildoers, tracked up with blood. The gang of priests is like the ambuscade of bandits who murder on the road to Shechem, where they have encouraged depravity.
Now, that's a fancy way. The word gedudim, the ambuscade or ambuscade of bandits. What is the translation you have for gedudim? I mean, it's a very easy word to phrase. What? A troop of robbers? Oh, okay. What do you have?
Robbers.
Yeah. So what it tells us is that there were certain roads that maybe were more dangerous, but also or more trafficked upon anyways. But the priests are compared to that. The priests are compared to the bandits. They're robbing people and murdering people, but again, taking from them, doing it says murdering, taking from them, doing what they want to do. Yeah.
In the house of Israel, I have seen a horrible thing. Ephraim has fornicated there. Israel has defiled himself. Even Judah has reaped a harvest of you. When I would restore my people's fortunes.
Now, what's interesting here is that's where the chapter ends. And as Reverend Lynn already said, it doesn't end there. So that's why they have a comma, because you can't even end that there. Mary, how does yours end? Does yours end with a comma? Okay, so, but here we have that phrase again, Israel is fornicating, Ephraim and Israel. And then it says, Judah was along for the ride too. Gam Yehuda, also Yehuda, you've been also doing that too. So, yeah, they've been behaving like you too. And again, they've been all doing this, all of them, Israel, Ephraim. And again, it's interesting how Ephraim is always singled out in Hosea, at least in these chapters we're reading, because again, Ephraim was only one part of Israel. It's sometimes used as a synonym for Israel because it was the most powerful of the northern tribes. It was the tribe of most of the kings. It was the area where the capital was, and Ephraim is the main rival. Is where Jeroboam, the first king, was from the prophet Ephraim, was from the tribe of Ephraim. So they're used as a synonym for Israel, Ephraim and Israel, just like we have Judah and Jerusalem, right? Or we have Judah and Zion are used synonymously. They use those for poetic purposes. They'll use those terms synonymously, but in Hosea, he'll oftentimes throw in Judah as a part of that too. So Judah's been a part of that too. And then the next line is, when I would restore my people's fortunes.
When I
and-
would heal Israel, the guilt of Ephraim reveals itself, and the wickedness of Samaria, for they have acted treacherously, with thieves breaking in and bands raiding outside.
Yes, and that's because look at the line. It says, when I would heal. Kerafa'e Israel. Rapha, right? To heal. To Ropheh Israel. I would heal Israel. So I would restore my people's fortunes, and when I would heal Israel. So it seems like a horrible place to break. Now, the break, again, the chapters were put in by Christian scholars. But the problem is there was actually a break there in the Hebrew. So in the Hebrew text, there might have been a paragraph break, which shouldn't have been there either. But again, it shows us that either the text we have wasn't great, or the way that the Judah editors did it. And we know, by the way, there's a Judah editor. You'll see it at the very, very end. But there is definitely a Judah editor that was on here. And again, it's not like the Judah editor threw in Gam Yehuda. Also, we were doing it too. You didn't need to. And probably, again, it wasn't edited. It wasn't added by the editor. It wasn't like they redacted that and said, oh, we better throw in Judah here too. Hosea probably said that. But this break is really bad because it begins with the word when I would heal, or like, I don't know if your translations, Reverend Lynn, what does your translation for one say?
When I
Okay.
restore the fortunes of my people.
When I would heal Israel? Verse 1?
Oh, yes, and when I would heal Israel.
Okay, is that what yours, does yours start that?
Would be happy.
When I would have, I like that better. I like the King James. It shouldn't end with, when I would restore my people's fortunes, when I would heal Israel. I mean, that's the same paragraph, which is why they ended with a comma here rather than a period, because the next word seemed to follow directly off of that idea, which is why, again, when I would restore my people's fortunes, when I would heal Israel, right? The guilt of Ephraim reveals itself, and the wickedness of Samaria.
6 should end.
6 should not end there with verse 11. It should, verse 1. It's not only that the chapter shouldn't end there, the verse shouldn't end there. The verse shouldn't end until when I would heal Israel. The next line,
There's a comma here, even there.
yes, but it could be there. It could end with when I would heal Israel. The guilt of, you could start the new sentence, which the guilt of Ephraim reveals itself and the wickedness of Samaria. Look, what we know for sure is the guilt of Ephraim reveals itself and the wickedness of Samaria. Those two lines are the poetic doublet that we normally have. Because the doublet that's here is when I would restore my people's fortunes, when I would heal Israel. That's the doublet. The doublet includes that first line. But whatever. I mean, however it is, it's not a good place to break it. This is where, again, this concept continues, right? You're behaving like this, and I would have fixed it. I would have come in and fixed it. But again, you're behaving horribly. And again, here you have Israel, Ephraim, and Samaria. But really, this one would go with that one, and Ephraim and Samaria would go as the parallel with that one. And then these parallels go there. I mean, you can see where the things match up. All right.
And they do not consider that I remembered all their wickedness. Why, their misdeeds have been all around them. They have been ever before me. In malice, they make a king merry, and officials in treachery.
Yeah, and that's a phrase that's paralleled, right? Oh, 1 second, sorry. You need to hit that. Let's see. So here they're saying the way that these chapters, these verses work, they should probably be in a different order. Should probably be 4, 6, 3, 5 rather than 3, 4, 5, 6. It should be 4, 6, 3, 5. It's possible, but it's basically saying that we don't like the way that this is ordered because it doesn't seem to make sense in the order that we have it. But again, we'll read it the way it is, and then you'll see if you like it better. These 4 verses differently. Okay.
They commit adultery, all of them, like an oven fired by a baker who desists from stoking only from the kneading of the dough to its leavening. The day they made our king sick and officials with the poison of wine, he gave his hand to traitors. For they approach their ambush with their hearts like an oven. Through the night their baker has slept. In the morning it flares up like a blazing fire.
Yeah. And they like this verse 6 to come after the thing about the baker. They like 4, 6, 3, 5. And then the last part would end in malice. They make a king merry, and officials in treachery. The day they made our king sick, officials with the poison of wine, he gave his hand to traitors. As you notice, it says we don't quite understand the meaning of this because those are all the words. Those are the words. The word yain is there, the word hand, the word traitors. These words are all here, but we don't really understand them. And they don't even like the order because the narrative of the bakers, the imagery, of the bakers, and then the imagery of the king and the wine work better together. And so they like that. They like these lines, the wine and king lines together, and then the baking lines together. They're not. I mean, was it badly edited, or was this kind of a poem or a structure that Hosea is playing after that they knew in the North? That all of this kind of like maybe this was a play on a song or a poem that already existed and he played off of it. We don't know, but again, it seems strange. Don't have this a lot in the other prophets. We don't have this a lot in the rest of the Bible. I've mentioned before, the book of Samuel is the book that we see as the most corrupted. There's lines that are missing, and we know that because we found the Dead Sea Scrolls and we said, oh, that version makes a lot more sense. So there's either scribal errors or something happened. We had bad texts that were copied, and we have a bad version of it. We know it. Even the Septuagint has a better version of the book of Samuel than we have in the Masoretic text, in the Hebrew Bible. But in this case, we don't have a different version of it. We can't say that this is the wrong order, and we just don't know. But it's an example of like something we just don't get. But maybe they did. Maybe they understood it, and that phrase made sense to the people in the North. Well, let's continue.
They all get heated like an oven and devour their rulers. None of them calls to me. All their kings have fallen by their hand. Ephraim is among the peoples. He is rotting away. Ephraim is like a cake incapable of turning.
And this seems to be going back to the baking illusions, these imageries of baking, right? It seems as though, I mean, the word uga means cake, so so it's not good, that's for sure. Yeah. I don't know, do you have a different translation? He is rotting away. Ephraim is like a cake, incapable of turning. I mean, we don't really, I mean, those are the words. Those are the Hebrew words. Bli hafucha.
He's half-baked.
That he's half-baked. Yeah, I mean, to some
Burnt.
extent,
He's burnt on one side because.
yes, it to some extent, he can't rise normally. He's not cooking. He's burning. Yeah, I mean, it's possible that he's burning because the insides can't get cooked. So the outside's getting cooked too hard. The inside's not getting cooked. It's not rising. It's not doing what it's supposed to do. So, but it's definitely illusions of cakes and in the oven kind of things. And turning, that's the word. Hafucha is turning. But it's also, you flip it over too. Like, I'm not saying it's an upside down cake, but it is, the word hafuch is to turn upside down. It's to flip. So that's why it's translated as turning. It's probably a good translation, but again, that's the imagery we have here.
Strangers have consumed his strength, but he has taken no notice. Also, mold is scattered over him, but he has taken no notice.
Is that everybody's translation there? Mold? Yeah. It actually even has it here. Yeah, we're not sure. We're not sure what it means. I mean, we really aren't. So we're trying to, maybe it's mold, maybe it's a gray hair. The reason that it says Akkadian shibu is because there is a possibility that it has something to do with that, because in the Akkadian language, shibu means gray hair. We don't know though. And so that's why we're not really sure. Both could go in there. Both could fit there in the sense that we were just
Maybe one
talking
of
about
those gray
rotting-
festivals that looks like hair.
rotting, maybe, but rotting cake but now it's consumed his strength. So
Yeah,
maybe he's
unappetizing, whatever.
getting older. Yeah, we don't know. But that's an example of us just not understanding the phrases. All right.
Though Israel's pride has been humbled before his very eyes, they have not turned back to their God, the Eternal One, whom they have not sought despite everything.
Yeah, and again, there's that Gaon Yisrael, the pride of Israel. They need to be humbled, right? They need to be humbled.
Instead, Ephraim has acted like a silly dove with no mind. They have appealed to Egypt. They have gone to Assyria.
Yeah, so we read about Assyria. We read about them going to the Assyrians and trying to get favor from them. Here it also says they went to Egypt, and we know that. They went to Egypt. Judah went to Egypt. Israel went to Egypt. These different countries that they relied on for help. No.
When they go, I will spread my net over them. I will bring them down like birds of the sky. I will chastise them when I hear their bargaining.
Yeah, so that tells us that they used to catch birds with nets, by the way. It just told us that, right? It just gave us a little imagery of birds being caught out of the sky with nets.
Bargaining,
Yeah. What does your translation have there?
good deeds.
Yeah. I will chastise them. Well, that's not even there. Yeah, yeah, bargaining is probably not a great translation either.
It says, according to the report to their congregation.
Yeah, that's the word kishma la'adatam. The word shama, right? Shama means to hear. And adatam means literally their congregation, or perhaps in front of other people, not necessarily a congregation, but in front of witnesses. Adat is like Adat Elohim or Adat Ariel, Adat Yisrael. Adat is a congregation. It's one of the translations. Yeah, it's again, it's in front. It's this one didn't even. It's not even there. It doesn't even translate it with the literal translation, which is to hear them amongst the community or amongst the congregation. Is that what yours translation says, Mary? Yeah, in front of other people. I mean, they translate it as bargaining because they assume that what they're talking about is what you do when you bargain in front of other people, that other people heard you negotiate, but it's not really, I mean, that's why the best answer is meaning of Hebrew uncertain. We don't exactly know what that phrase means, but again, the understanding of it is pretty clear. They are going to be caught when they do this by going to these other countries, these other empires. They're going to be caught.
Woe to them for straying from me, destruction to them for rebelling against me, for I was their redeemer, yet they have plotted treason against me. But they did not cry out to me sincerely as they lay wailing. They debauch over new grain and new wine. They are faithless to me. I strengthened their arms, and they plot evil against me.
Now, any different translation of that line? I strengthened their arms. I mean, it's pretty clear that I took care of them. I did all these things for them and they turned on me. I mean, I don't know if I would have necessarily put it in italics, but it's very clear that, God did these things and is now, now we've turned on the one who strengthened us, right? This is what he says.
They come back. They have been of no use, like a slack bow. Their officers shall fall by the sword because of the stammering of their tongues. Such shall be the results of their jabbering in the land of Egypt.
Yeah. Let me just see.
What verse is that?
This is verse 16. This is the last verse. So, definitely has to do with their talking. Definitely has to, what? What does yours say for verse 16?
They are like a treacherous bow.
Uh-huh.
Princes shall fall by the sword.
Yep, that's the same. But there's still, what's the what rest of it?
They shall be their, this shall be their derision in the land of Egypt.
Interesting. Yeah, the translations that they're using here are based on the fact that they're negotiating with these people. They're talking, but they're babbling essentially. What does yours say, Mary? Derision? Yeah, they went with a different understanding here, which is that this is really the way they're talking. Now that's it's based on the fact that like they translated the word stammering from here, miza'am, from their stammering. We're not sure. They were basically saying in other languages, right? In Arabic, that's a word for stammer, but we're not sure. We're not sure what this word za'am means, but we know leshonam means their tongues or their words, right?
This says insolence of their tongues.
Yeah, the word, so we don't know what this word's, they went with stammering rather than insolence. But and again, Agam be'eretz Mitzrayim is definitely in the land of Egypt. And they translated as Za'am and Agam. They kind of paralleled those as stammering and jabbering, which is because they're talking. It could be, but they reached for it because they went, well, in other languages, right? In Arabic, the word Za'am is stammer. So maybe, but they didn't know. It's another phrase where we just don't understand what the words mean, but we get the text, we get the point of it, we get the overall understanding, which is that this is their problem. They've turned to the Egyptians, they've turned to the Assyrians, and they're going to be punished for that. So we're probably going to finish here with chapter 8, which is which again will mean that next week we're going to read 9 through 14, but we'll see. Let's see what we read here too. This chapter, chapter 8, you know, it's part of the same text. It's part of the same prophecies of you screwed up. You know, this is where you went off. And again, we've read this in the other prophets. This isn't like a new concept that, you know, you're being punished for what you did. But yeah, let's take a look at this next prophecy, which again, does it have to be another chapter? Maybe, because, you know, maybe we could say that there's a break here in the ideas, or this is a place that, that the prophet, is started with another set of prophecies. But it's also possible that, no, this is just part of what we've been reading, which is this condemnation of where they went wrong. So let's continue.
Put a ram's horn to your mouth, like an eagle over the house of God, because they have transgressed my covenant and been faithless to my teaching.
Yeah, eagle is one of the translations for the word nesher. What do you have, Mary, for yours? Yeah, so it's just a strange phrase that a ram's horn to your mouth is like an eagle over the house of God. So maybe it makes sense. Maybe there's another phrase here that we don't know. But again, the point is they've transgressed the covenant, faithless to the teaching. And here's what they say.
Israel cries out to me, "Oh my God, we are devoted to you." Israel rejects what is good, and enemies shall pursue him. They have made kings, but not with my sanction. They have made officers, but not of my choice. Of their silver and gold, they have made themselves images to their own undoing. I reject your calf, Samaria. I am furious with them. Will they never be capable of purity?
And here they say, look, you've made kings that you did not have authority to make. You've made images that you were not supposed to make, and in particular, the golden calves that you made in the north. Samaria was not where the calf was, at least not the ones that we know of. There might have been a golden calf there too, but we know there was a golden calf in Dan, and there was one in Bethel. And that's what the kings of Samaria, that's what the kings of the north encouraged people to pray at. And so here is a northern prophet who's saying that those things are bad. They never should have been there. I don't want them there. God didn't want them there. God was never happy that those calves were there.
For it was Israel's doing. It was only made by a joiner. It is not a god. No, the calf of Samaria shall be reduced to splinters.
Yep. And again, this is a northern person saying that. This is not a southern prophet like Isaiah or a prophet from Jerusalem who's saying, these people are so bad, they're worshiping golden calf. This is a guy from the north who's saying it.
They sow wind, and they shall reap whirlwind, standing stalks devoid of ears and yielding no flower. If they do yield any, strangers shall devour it.
Yeah, and that's a very famous phrase. They sow the wind and they shall reap the whirlwind, right? Yeah, you can't sow wind. You can't sow things into the wind. And the image by itself would be amazing, just saying, you're sowing the wind. You're not sowing land, you're sowing stuff into the wind. But not only can you not do it, right? If you do it, you reap a whirlwind. So you sow wind, you reap a whirlwind. That's what happens. So it's a beautiful image. It's a powerful image because, again, it's crazy. It's a crazy image. You can't plant seeds in a wind. But what it means, of course, is that when you put energy into something that's wrong, what you get back is much worse than what you started with. And that you can essentially implant your energy into something that's bad. And that when it comes back, it's going to be even worse. It's going to be even stronger. Just like if you planted seeds, they grow into something huge, right? You plant a little seed, it comes back, big plant, big tree. Something amazing comes out of that little seed. Well, the same thing goes for doing bad stuff. When you put it into the wind, when you put it there, it's going to come back at you like a whirlwind. It's going to come back to you like a tornado. Yep. So, and that's, again, paralleled against real grain, right? What happens when you actually plant grain.
Israel is bewildered. They have now become among the nations like an unwanted vessel, like a lonely wild ass, for they have gone up to Assyria. Ephraim has courted friendship. And while they are courting among the nations, there I will hold them fast, and they shall begin to diminish in number from the burden of kings and of king and officers. For Ephraim has multiplied altars for guilt. His altars have redounded to his guilt. The many teachings I wrote for him have been treated as something alien. When they present sacrifices to me, it is but flesh for them to eat. God has not accepted them.
Yeah. And again, Ephraim has multiplied altars for guilt, right? So it's not just one place that Ephraim has been offering up these sacrifices. It's all over the place, right? So this is going on all over the place.
Behold, their iniquities will be remembered. Their sins will be punished. Back to Egypt with them. Israel has ignored his maker and built temples, and Judah has fortified many cities. So I will set fire to his cities, and it shall consume their fortresses.
Yeah. And again, Judah is lumped together there with Israel. But look at this idea of what happens when they offer sacrifices. When they present sacrifices to me, which again, we're not 100% sure that that's the way this word hav high. Well, how does yours translate it, Mary? How does the King James, when they present sacrifices to me, that line?
They sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of my.
And Reverend Lynn, what does yours say?
Again, the verse.
13.
They love sacrifice. They sacrifice flesh and eat it, but the Lord has no delight in it.
Yeah. Okay. So the way this is translates it is an interesting one because it gives a whole different meaning to it than the other translations, but this might be a good translation in the sense that basically saying they're not offering sacrifices to me. It's just a way for them to eat. And I haven't accepted them. I don't accept them. They're not offering so the interesting thing about this is that here, even when they're offering sacrifices to God, it doesn't say they're offering them to Baal. It doesn't say that. It says they're offering them to me. But they're not really to me. They're ways for them to eat these things. And of course, they're not doing them with the right intention. Right? God has not accepted them. God does not want them. God is not allowing them to be forgiven. on the contrary, God is remembering their sins, and God is going to punish them.
Back to Egypt with them.
And that's where it gets really, really strong. They're going back to Egypt, which is like the worst thing that could happen. And they don't mean it like they're going to Egypt, to ask for help. They're going back to Egypt because they're going to be exiled there. They're going back to Egypt as if they're going back to the starting place, right? They're going back to retrace their steps, to come back out, to be, to be redeemed, if you will. Going back to Egypt is literally the worst thing possible, which is you have to start over. So that is the phrase that we're given there. It's pretty wild that they get hit with this. And again, even when they're offering to God, they're not going to find anything. Next week we're going to come back, and again, one could argue that the chapter it doesn't necessarily stop this idea that we've already been reading. But what happened, and again, it's a little difficult to say, like where this next. There's another idea that's coming up here, which the last chapters, what we're going to read, the majority of what we're going to read next week, which is the return, if you will. Look, we've already heard it. We heard it already. We heard that Israel is going to be redeemed and taken back, but we're going to hear it very, very profoundly next week. And just so you know, I don't like ending where we did, because you're going back to Egypt. Just to understand that the lines that God says that we're going to read next week. How can I give up on you, Ephraim? How can I surrender you, Israel? Right? How can I give up on you? That phrase that is used here rhetorically, right? That God says is something that we really only hear in Hosea in this way, which is God literally saying, almost again like a person, I can't, I'm frustrated with you and I'm disappointed in you. And again, next week we're going to see the image of the son, more of the child. We've been doing a lot of the spouse, but now we're going to really be beyond the son, and being a child of God. But this idea that God can't give up on us. Yeah.
Is there any kind of consistency or time period division of referring to the relationship as a spousal versus a parental?
No, not only no. And the interesting thing is that we don't, I mean, let's assume that Hosea's prophecies go chronologically. Let's just assume that for them, which we don't, it doesn't have to be, but let's even assume it. The fact that the fact that Hosea will compare us to a wife and then to a son in the same book, the same prophet, the same person does that, shows us that it's not like people used to say, oh, we're God's wife, or no, now we're God's son. It's the same guy does it, even if he changes his imagery from one of a wife to a child. He did it over this book. He did it over this text. He did it, and I'm not even 100% sure that he would have said it in. Well, the reason that it is the way it is because the prophecies and the acting out that Hosea did with Gomer, with his wife, essentially is the adulterous part, the bad part. The part with the son starts off bad and then turns out to be okay. It's the,
But it's still
yes, and it's very much like the prodigal
And-
son, kind
And
of.
how about locations of prophets?
Uh,
Like, do northern prophets
No,
do one more,
because he had,
southern prophets? No,
because he had both.
he
And-
has both,
and
but other prophets also?
And Isaiah has prophecies, and Ezekiel had prophecies where we were like a woman. So they had it in the South, right? The calling, as Isaiah does throughout, Bat Zion, right? The daughter, fair Zion, right? We had that all, and Jeremiah too, fair Zion, maiden Zion. I mean, really, it's like daughter Zion, right? That's what Bat Zion means. I mean, everywhere they translate it as fair or maiden Zion, whatever. It's daughter Zion. I mean, that is the word Bat means daughter. I mean, you can say it's fair, maiden, whatever you want to say. I get it. I mean, maybe it's poetic, but that's not what the word Bat means. It means daughter. So every time one of those prophets said the word Bat Zion, that's what they're saying, daughter Zion. So I don't know. If you look at it from the standpoint of like northern and southern, they both use feminine imagery for us as a people, and the imagery of us as being children or sons is also there. But again, it's not like we're the wife only, we're also the daughter, also the son. I get it, but it's Bat, and it's also, as we're going to see, the comparison of us of us being a son is what we're going to.
And in these prophecies, God is always a father, not ever the mother or the.
Yes, I can't think of imagery of the prophets that God is. No, not so much in the prophets. No, no, not that I can think of.
again.
I can't think of one where God is. No. All I'm going to tell you is that the next week's reading is interesting because again, it's going to shift a little bit to that. But what's interesting about next week is that we're also going to read references to other parts of the Bible. For example, that one I just showed you said, how can I give up on Israel? I can't make it like Admon Zeboim. Those are the cities that God destroyed when God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. He destroyed other places, including Admon Zeboim. But here we're going to read this amazing stuff about us that compares us and reminds us of Jacob. Jacob, our ancestor, who tried to supplant his brother, right? He strove with an angel, right? That he was this guy who didn't do good things either. Well, God is telling us that Jacob wasn't a good guy. You know, these are some, first of all, it's interesting. We don't have a lot of times where the Bible refers back to itself, right? That already is interesting. But to compare us and to bring up those situations, it's a really interesting little meditation on what we thought of Jacob as our ancestor, even during the biblical period. So yeah, there's going to be some interesting stuff for us. And so we'll see that next week, but it will end on I'm not going to ruin it for you, as most of the prophets will eventually give us, a little bit of hope. But yeah, we'll have that. And just remember, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but this is the last words, which were clearly not written by Hosea himself, but by an editor. The wise will consider these words, the prudent will take note of them, for the paths of God are smooth, the righteous can walk in them, while sinners will stumble on them. So they're good words to think about all the time. Consider the words. Who is the wise person who's going to consider words? Take note of them. All right, everybody, we will see you in the days ahead. Stay well, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow night for Cal Vote or Friday night at services. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.